The Season 4 premiere of The Good Place is first and foremost a setup episode. It introduces basically all of the important character arcs for the remainder of the series, as well as hiding some of the bigger twists in plain sight. It's all really good stuff, but also a bit hard to talk about in any detail without risking spoiler territory, so I'll hold my tongue and instead talk about a minor but greatly appreciated aspect of these episodes. When we were introduced to the afterlife in Season 1, individual character reactions were sidelined to make time for all of the necessary world building, but now that we've had 3 seasons to get acclimated, we can breeze past the exposition and see some more unique explorations of what a person might do in this situation. Simone's refusal to believe what's happening is real feels the most like what I would do if I was reincarnated in the afterlife, though without so much antagonism of the possibly imaginary people. And even though she ends up being a fake out, I also do resonate quite a bit with Linda. I'm a simple man at heart, and while I would definitely want to try some new things with afterlife magic, at some point I would just want alone time to play video games and watch TV. Also, Brent. Fork that guy. I've always had a hard time connecting with main characters. By the nature of common storytelling conventions, they typically serve as a point of view character, so their personality needs to be more restrained to allow the audience to latch onto them, and the supporting cast provides the color and character of the story world. And I wouldn't say that Eleanor is an exception to this rule. She's easily the least extreme member of the main cast, but The Good Place does use her relative ordinariness in an extremely interesting way. Sprinkled throughout The Good Place are references to the idea that the fundamental flaw of the afterlife system is that the entities making decisions about humanity aren't themselves humans, therefore their ability to judge a person's moral character is disconnected from the practical realities of human life. Consequently, Eleanor's position as the every woman of the group makes her the ideal remedy to this problem. The struggles she faced in her life on Earth are generally pretty representative of an average person, or at least an average white American person. She still has a clear personality and internal struggles that are unique to her character, but her experiences enable her to empathize with the widest range of people out of all the main cast, and that's the real value that she brings to the team. In Michael's original experiment, the 4 humans improving their moral character was an accidental byproduct of a system he had designed to be a torture chamber. But what goes unstated in that accidental discovery is that the 4 humans only improved because they were made to believe that their improvement would have an impact on their lives. And that's the core issue with the cultural belief that suffering builds character. It's only true insofar as character provides relief from suffering. When Eleanor and Jason torture Chidi in the second neighborhood, they do so with the implicit belief that his misery by itself will be a catalyst for personal growth, but it's only when he has an escape hatch in the form of teaching Jason ethics that he can become a better person. In the same way, that bootstraps mentality that when life gets hard you just need to grit your teeth and work harder rings hollow when in the real world the only reward for surviving a day of poverty is another day of poverty. Of course, the other end of the spectrum, unchecked luxury and relaxation, is still an impediment to growth, with the potential for even greater consequences that get explored in the near future. But the key takeaway from this episode is that there is a big difference between challenges and cruelty, and only one of the two has the potential to bring out the best in people. Chapter 43 of The Good Place is such a brilliant web of misdirection, and like most great whodunits, the solution is found by rethinking the questions. From the time Glenn arrives, the primary line of questioning is in whether Michael can be trusted, and every new piece of evidence that gets presented makes it seem more and more likely that Glenn is telling the truth. But because our attention is focused on Michael, the actual saboteur, Bad Janet, can hide in plain sight and even cover her own trail without arousing suspicion. Incidentally, this situation is another example of Jason solving a problem but being dismissed. When he said that they should believe both Glenn and Michael, Glenn was correct that there was an imposter, but Michael was correct that it wasn't him. What's especially great about this reveal, though, is that the conceit of the new test subjects is that they were selected to target each of the main cast. John for Tahani, Simone for Chidi, Brent for Eleanor, and presumably Linda for Jason. When Linda was revealed to be a fake and Chidi chosen as a substitute, most of the audience likely assumed that Jason would just be without a counterpart in the new test subjects, but Linda was really just a cover for the actual Jason sabotage, replacing Janet with Bad Janet. If I had to pick one biggest missed opportunity in The Good Place, it would be that we never got to see Tahani get her afterlife memories back. I think that either this episode or the one where she became friends with John would have been the perfect opportunity, but the way it is now, it just gets unceremoniously off-screened, which I think is a shame. But by the same token, one of my favorite aspects of the series is that when Jason gets his memories back, he doesn't change. Too many comedy shows with a dumb character have gags where through some plot contrivance the character becomes either temporarily or permanently permanently more intelligent, and it's one of those things that can be slightly funny as a one-off joke, but completely undermines the character if it's overly drawn out. So the fact that when given an easy opportunity to completely rewrite Jason, the writers chose to maintain his characterization shows that they understand what makes Jason special. And what makes Jason special is that he becomes the best version of himself not in spite of his non-specific learning disability, but because, like the rest of the cast, he was finally put in a position for his unique abilities to shine. Not treating his low intelligence as a moral failing that needs to be corrected, but as a part of his identity that deserves respect and understanding is, to me, a significant part of what makes Jason such an important character. If the thesis of The Good Place is that people will improve when they're given outside support, then the antithesis is that outside support is worthless when a person doesn't recognize the need to improve. In the same way, if Eleanor represents a person who knows they're bad but is trying to be better, Brent represents a person who thinks they're great and refuses to believe otherwise. And that's really what makes Brent and people like him so infuriating. The unchecked bigotry and entitlement are awful, to be sure, but if somebody has the humility to accept that they're in the wrong, you can at least work with them to change their perspectives, and without that basic level of self-awareness, you'd be better off teaching ethics to a brick wall. So when Simone expresses frustration that everybody has to walk on eggshells around Brent's ego, she's completely valid. As something of a recovering Brent myself, gentle encouragement can only get you so far when you're not ready to really do the hard work of deconstructing your biases. The synthesis of the opening arguments, then, is that for some people, polite correction is the outside support that they need to improve. But sometimes, oftentimes even, outside support looks more like a slap in the face. In line with the first half of Season 4 intentionally paralleling and expanding on different aspects of Season 1, each of the new test subjects coming to terms with the neighborhood not being what it seems is a great exploration of each of their characters. Simone and Eleanor being the first of their respective groups to realize it keys in on their perceptiveness, but where Eleanor was the type of person to immediately vocalize her realization, Simone had the tact and patience to start a counter-investigation in secret, only showing her hand when the time was right. Chidi, as the only double feature, maintains the willful ignorance of problems we've seen from him before, not wanting to accept the evidence for fear of losing his current happiness. But we also get to see that his desire to do everything he can to help others isn't conditional on whether they would do the same for him, which may have been suspect when his major sacrifices thus far had only been for Eleanor. John, like Tahani, is the most underexplored character in his debut season, and Brent parallels Jason in that he immediately recognized that something wasn't adding up, but unlike Jason, he was arrogant enough to believe that he could improve his situation by himself instead of reaching out to potential friends for help. There's a reason Jason was able to solve one of the reboots, but Brent maintained denial even when presented with irrefutable evidence. Not to take away from the important moral message of Chapter 47, but probably my most quoted singular line in The Good Place is this right here.
Step 1, get a plan. Step 2, do the plan. Yeah. This is working.
It's something that comes up way more often than you'd expect. The idea that people aren't at a single fixed level of morality is something that feels so obvious when said out loud, but so much of our society is built around the idea that rehabilitation isn't possible. Whether it's our overly punitive prison system or the individualistic mentalities that tell us to cut toxic people out of our lives, we spend a lot of our limited time on Earth sorting people into arbitrary good and bad boxes instead of working to build mutual understanding with our fellow human beings. And before anybody strawmans me, I'm not saying that everyone should take personal responsibility for teaching their abusers good morals, or that we should let dangerous criminals roam the streets with no recourse. But on a societal level, in our institutions that we build, we can and should treat everybody like they deserve a chance to improve. Sometimes that means keeping people contained until they can prove that they're no longer a threat. But in that containment, we should still treat them with compassion out of respect for their humanity. Even in the best possible conditions, some people are going to be incapable of change, but even then we have a moral responsibility to keep trying, because as Michael says, you can never be sure what kind of person they'll become tomorrow. If you know me, you know that I'm a sucker for flashback episodes. There's something incredibly compelling to me about taking a microscope to the most significant moments of a character's life and unifying them into a cohesive picture of what makes them the way they are, and there's no better character in The Good Place to dedicate a flashback to than Chidi. Since episode 1, Chidi has been the moral authority of the show. Every time a character has an ethical conundrum, they automatically turn to Chidi for guidance, but as we learn over the course of the show, Chidi may be an expert on moral philosophy in theory, but he struggles to keep that expertise in practice. So with a flashback, we get to see him learn important lessons from each of his friends that allow him to put his theoretical knowledge into practice and, in so doing, save the universe. From Jason, he learns that he needs to take action even when he's unsure of the outcome. From Tahani, he learns that allowing himself to fail is the only way he can improve. From Eleanor, he learns that he doesn't have to shoulder the burden alone, and from Michael, he learns that answers aren't something you logically prove, they're something you work through every day. And I think that's really what moral philosophy is all about. Trying to do what's right, learning from your mistakes, and making the world a little bit better every day with the help of the people you love. The final ethical problem in The Good Place is the problem of eternity, which gets explored in a few different ways, the first of which is eternal punishment, good or immensely bad and counterproductive. Now, obviously for people like the main cast who were imperfect in relatively harmless and mundane ways, punishment at all, let alone eternal punishment, really shouldn't be on the table. I'm sure we can all agree on that. One step removed, we get people who cause significant harm to others in their life, but can still be re-educated, and that's where the new afterlife system comes in. Rather than being tortured in the bad place, they're subjected to a series of tests specifically designed to spur personal growth, and that makes sense, because punishment is consistently shown to be one of the worst ways to change people's behavior. But what about the truly evil? The people so vile and irredeemable that they shake our belief in humanity's potential to even be good. The Good Place doesn't really dwell on this since it's, a comedy series, but it's fair to ask, how does the new system handle the worst that humanity has to offer? Granting them access to paradise seems wrong, even if they were reformed over billions of years. But by the same token, if they were sent to the bad place and tortured, what purpose would that even serve? Because if you really think about it, suffering without relief in perpetuity will inevitably reach the point of being disproportionate. Even if it feels like justice for a time, eventually it's just more senseless cruelty, and if you were to ask me, I think true justice for this small fraction of humanity is to simply be removed from existence. No punishment, but no chance of redemption either. As a recovering theater kid, I really can't get enough of Vicky. She perfectly captures the kind of pretentious appeals to artistry that are simultaneously deeply annoying, but also low-key necessary to creating good art. I've known that person, I've been that person, and I have a sincere appreciation for the kind of mindset that allows people to push the bounds of creative expression, even as I can find it embarrassing. And I think that using Vicky as the figurehead for transitioning the Bad Place architects into the new system is a clever move, because she's consistently been adversarial with Michael on the basis that she likes his ideas but feels that she would be able to use them more effectively, and having Michael hand her the reins brings both of their arcs full circle. Speaking of that transition, the growing pains of the Bad Place architects creates an interesting thematic through line with the idea that nobody is beyond rehabilitation. Recognizing that the demon's natural ability to cause misery can be redirected into crafting productive challenges for the new system shows that they aren't a drain on society, they just needed to have their talents redirected. I think that it would have been cool to have Good Place architects learn a similar lesson, something along the lines of meaningful support versus coddling, but I could see how that might make the closing chapters of the story feel a bit more cluttered, so I'll accept the missed opportunity. The second half of the problem of eternity is the problem of heaven, which is, on one end, explored as the cosmic horror we see in the real Good Place, where everybody eventually becomes a pleasure zombie that lives their infinite afterlife essentially numb to their own existence. And the solution to that problem being a means to leave the Good Place is an emotionally satisfying conclusion, but for a slightly different reason than the vacations are only special because they end explanation that we get. Because the real fundamental problem with popular conceptions of heaven heaven is that they treat goodness as a state that a person can reach, a fixed level that you meet one time and receive eternal reward. But the point of the good place and of moral philosophy as a whole is that there is no finish line to morality. Being a good person isn't about passing an arbitrary threshold, it's about never losing the desire to grow and change. Moreover, that desire to grow is, or at least should be, rooted in the cooperative effort of building a just society. Goodness is as much about the effect you have on the world as it is about your own internal emotional journey. But the very existence of the good place undermines that fact if it exists as an endpoint where good people can no longer have any impact on the universe. So by giving them the ability to leave and having the specific mechanism of their departure be dissolving into good vibes dust that inspires positive change in others, the contradiction is resolved and the point of moral virtue as putting more good into the world is maintained. In this way, the good place imagines heaven not as a realm of infinite pleasure, but as a place where the sum of human wisdom and experience is cultivated into a force that changes the world for the better. When I've reached the end of each of the series I've covered on my page, I felt compelled to make some grand statement about what each of the stories mean to me and how they've impacted my life. And I think genuinely the best character to explain my relationship to the good place is none other than Jeff the doorman. Bear with me. I've mentioned before that I was spoiled on the big season 1 twist before I ever watched the show, and a pattern with me and the way that I consume media is that I often subconsciously treat knowing facts about something as basically the same as actually experiencing it for myself. Consequently, upon learning that they were secretly in the bad place all along, I felt like I got the show, and there was no real point in actually sitting down and watching it. And once I've made that internal mental leap, I often just open the floodgates. I already know what happens, so I might as well just watch a video essay or read an article to learn more about it. I collect frog items because, at least in theory, I like frogs. But here's the thing, my little chili babies. Knowing facts about a story isn't the same as experiencing a story and letting yourself be emotionally affected by it. Knowing that the main cast was in the bad place all along isn't the same as understanding what being in the bad place means to the characters. I know, this is mind-blowing stuff, and it's very possible that I'm alone in this particular kind of consumption habit, but when I think of Jeff and I think of Mr. Jumpy Legs, I'm reminded that at the end of the day, there's no substitute for the real thing. Don't get me wrong, I still love hearing other people's interpretations or learning bits of trivia I hadn't noticed for myself, but that only means as much as it does because I've gone on the journey myself. Without that personal experience, the good place may as well just be a list of facts. So if you're anything like me, first of all, condolences, but second of all, I just want you to never lose sight of the fact that the best part of liking frogs is getting to see frogs for yourself. So go outside and find a frog. There will be zero consequences to this plan. Anyways, dear viewer, this has been The Good Place. I hope you've enjoyed your time with my videos as much as I've enjoyed making them and seeing your feedback along the way. I hope you'll stick around for future projects coming down the pipeline, and until I see you again, take it sleazy.